Dean Obeidallah. He wants to be your Muslim friend.
Most Muslims, I know many, are great people.
Watch this.
People.
You're listening to the Dean Obeidallah Show, where comedy meets politics and all things in between.
And welcome back to the Dean Obeidallah Show. We're live right here Wednesday, July 10th. I know a lot of people on hold about the ACA and healthcare. Maybe we'll try to integrate some calls here. But my friend Julian Zelizer, who you know from CNN, he's an analyst there at Princeton University, professor, author, various books, is here in studio. Talk about certain things, and it's just, first of all, Julian, nice to see you, my friend. You're on vacation. Good to see
nice
you.
to
Welcome
be back.
I am so concerned, before we get into anything else, that the Democrats are beginning to eat each other alive. That I'm just seeing AOC after Joe Biden in an interview on a podcast, and that's everyone's right to do. Don't get me wrong. You can go after Joe Biden, but now it seems you have Nancy Pelosi going after AOC and three others a few days ago. Then they clap back, and now you got this. And I just talked to Zelina Maxwell, who, you know, is an MS contributor, is an executive here, and we were chatting, and what she's hearing, I'm like, I just hope we can heal when this primary is over, because we're early in the primary and we're going crazy. But first, a little humor. Lauren, here's Sebastian Gorka on his radio show today, and listen, a caller calls in and just listen closely to what happens. It's like a 30-second clip. It just makes my day, because I think Gorka's blocked me a long time ago. He's an anti-Muslim asshole. So let's hear Gorka.
Compared to you, though, I feel like if you're having a debate with some liberal, you could just start talking and they'd start shaking in their boots.
Yeah, they usually end up as little puddles on the floor. But thanks for calling, Jason. Share. You've got 60 seconds. Share your wisdom.
Well, my favorite magazine just did a little feature on you, saying you were the top journalist of this year, and I was really excited, and I wasn't sure if you were aware of that yet.
No. What is this that you are talking of?
It's called Dipshit Magazine.
Oh, you're one of those. This is the definition of a coward. I love it how they lie. I'll talk to Jason offline.
That's right. So as opposed to me, Gorka, I will talk offline. I will steal his soul while he walks the night. To me, Gorka is a day-walking vampire. He's clearly a Hungarian vampire who comes here, and I can walk the day because I'm Gorka. And that guy got him. And it goes earlier before that. He's sucking up. It's so great. The liberal guy calls up and sucks up the Gorka and saying more stuff. You're great. And then gives him the knife in the back. And it's live with video. And it's just great to watch Gorka's face. So it's the little things, Julian.
I'll have to watch that for some humor.
I'll send you the thing, but just Dipshit Magazine. Come on. I got to lie. I'm a child at heart. Like, aren't we all children? So let's talk about a few things here. We were just talking about the Trump administration. Bizarrely, from a political and from a human point of view, they flip-flopped. They were at one point arguing to preserve the ACA, what was left of it, after they gutted the mandate last year. It gets to the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals in March, they flip-flop. And now they're arguing. They submitted a brief, which I went through in May, and detailed everything in the ACA has to go. Everything, not saving any part, even coverage for pre-existing medical conditions. This seems to me, not as a human being, horrible, but politically, like malpractice, terrible.
Yeah, I mean, rationally, it's hard to understand why a politician would say, hey, let's remove benefits from, 20 million people and all sorts of protections and go into the election that way. There is no logic to it. So the only thing you could think is he believes that campaign promise, which had been central before he was president, is worth the cost somehow, or that he can blame it on the courts, some kind of subtle political move. For those who don't follow, just saying, well, the court ruled it unconstitutional. What can I do? But from a rational perspective, this gives Democrats the biggest issue other than Trump himself for 220.
And, Trump can lie a lot to his base, and they may care or may not care, doesn't matter. But when the ACA protection for pre-existing conditions, it applies across the board, not just policies for the marketplace. Right. So when all of a sudden a Trumper finds out their policy doesn't have the protections it once did, and their children are no longer covered for a disease, God forbid, they were born with. I was talking to a man who had that about a child. Or they had cancer. Now their insurance company is going to drop them because they could do that pre-ACA. And they go, what's going on? I don't know how sympathetic they're going to be or supportive of Donald Trump after that, because that's real life stuff for families.
Right. I mean, look, there's some things that Trump does in terms of policy that are below the radar. So a lot of the environmental regulations he's rolled back. are terrible and they have severe consequences, but people don't see it on a daily basis. But then when he does things that have real world consequences immediately, family separation, for example, that causes political problems for him. This would be at a whole level that we haven't seen. This is the opposite of a New Deal or Great Society. It's taking away this massive program without a backup plan and creating a certain amount of a lot of chaos and hardship for people. And so, again, it's always hard to predict in this political world because things aren't working the way they should.
Right.
But rationally, this is a big dismantling project.
And I think on some level you have Trump who wants to get rid of anything Obama's done. That's
right.
part of it. So in his mind, I can only assume the calculation, I can't think like him because I'm not a psychopath, but that he is thinking, well, we'll get rid of it, then it'll force Congress to work with me, and I can then come out and sign a new law protecting everyone's health insurance right before the election. So It's win-win type of thing.
It's like the Dreamers Act. He got rid of it, said that will give me the leverage, but the actual outcome was nothing happened, and that just remained. All these people live in limbo, and I think that's probably what you would see with healthcare because there's no point of agreement, and Democrats are not going to just sign on, I don't think, to a Trump healthcare proposal that doesn't meet any of their demands.
Absolutely. It would have to be the same robust coverage for pre-existing conditions you have now,
Yeah.
and there's no way. It's very hard to figure out a way to make that enforceable because the Congress cannot just tell corporations around this country what to do if they're not involved in interstate business. There's limits to Congress's powers. You know, we both know this. So this tax was their way of doing that. And when you got rid of the tax, then it's just Congress telling companies across the board, even insurance companies that are just based in one state, what they can do and what they can't do. And there's a problem. It's an overreach of congressional power on some level. I'm hoping the court does the good thing and doesn't do this, but I'm really fearful of this. So you wrote an article about Ross Perot, and he was brought up yesterday. But by the way, Fox News last night said Ross Perot was the first Donald Trump. I'm like, I didn't know Ross Perot was a bigot and racist and sexist the same way. So you wrote an article about Ross Perot and how what he did, though, might be impactful for 2020. But tell us a little bit, remind people a little bit Ross Perot and what he did remarkably in 1992, the number of votes he got.
Yeah, he's a Texas billionaire. He had been involved in all sorts of different political causes and quirky guy, liked to speak in these short, snappy sentences. And in 92, he runs. President Bush is running for re-election. That's George H.W. against Bill Clinton, who's governor of Arkansas. And he runs as a third-party candidate. And he announces on Larry King Live on CNN. He raises money through television. He doesn't really campaign that much. The other thing he does is he pays for these 30-minute infomercials, which is his main stump speech, where he talks a lot about, the federal deficit and that it was dangerous how high it was, and NAFTA. He went after NAFTA.
Yeah, that was a big thing.
Saying, jobs were going to be, you'll hear the sucking sound of jobs going to Mexico. And but what was really interesting was how he saw we were in an era of cable television. And it was, the 80s is when cable takes hold. And he saw that a candidate can go directly to people and circumvent reporters, not even traditionally campaign as much. He doesn't win any states. He wins a pretty large portion of the popular vote, though, and many people think he helped lose the election.
Right.
For
He won
Bush.
20 million, almost 20 million votes.
Yeah, 19. And again, the way he campaigned, though, I think actually touched on what we're seeing today. Both crafting the whole thing for cable television, for the cycles, for the immediacy, and even creating a personality, which is what he did in the way he talked.
I want to play a clip from an infomercial, a little over a minute, and it starts out him telling a folksy story, but what he's getting to is going to talk about Arkansas, where Bill Clinton had been governor, and to slam Clinton. But listen to the way people don't remember, and it sounds like Dana Carvey doing it on SNL, but this was Ross Perot, 1992, his infomercial, direct to camera with little chart. I was watching, I was so intrigued by it, but little chart. It was so folksy, it's so engaging now, even watching it now. Here's clip number 2.
To all of these examples of how problems would be solved for our country, I decided, well, this must really be interesting, and I should study Arkansas because I could probably learn a great deal myself about how to face, deal with, and solve these problems. Here is what I learned. It's fascinating. Now, before I start, I have to use my voodoo stick again, and it's not completely inappropriate because the first time as a boy I ever went to Arkansas, we went to the alligator farm. And this is a simulated alligator claw on a voodoo stick. So it reminds me of my first trip to Arkansas, where one of the things you could go see, this was before Disneyland, you could go see the alligators. Now, the great young lady, Ashley, that gave this to me just had a baby. She's fine, the baby's fine. Ashley, congratulations, and God bless you both. I grew up in Texarkana, Texas, 5 blocks from the Arkansas border. I know from my hitchhiking trip through Arkansas as a child, it's a beautiful state. But let's put in perspective just how big Arkansas is. This little red square here is Arkansas in the United States. The population of Arkansas is 2.4 million people, and that turns out to be less than the population of Dallas and Fort Worth, the Metroplex combined.
And from there, he dismantles everything Bill Clinton did in Arkansas as governor. First, he belittles the state. Right. But his it makes you want to listen. There's a folksy charm to this guy, which is authentic. It's undeniable.
Right.
And just listening now, I find it so engaging. I couldn't stop watching it today. I'm like, I got to do more work. But I'm like, I was engaged. And folks, he bought a 30-minute infomercial. And this was part of literally what was on national TV. And at one of the episodes, he got, I think it was in your article, 16 million people watched it.
No, he had huge numbers. He actually had several of these infomercials. And even when you listen to that, the stream of consciousness, very kind of back and forth folksy style, is what a lot of politicians do one way or another these days. And the infomercial, I think I wrote, is, it's almost a predecessor of Twitter, where he just said, I'm just going to say what I want. I'm going to say it directly to people. And so you can see some of the roots of what's going to happen in politics, not always for better, because we didn't see him how he would be as president. We just saw it as a campaign. He's also a real kind of anti-Washington populist. That's at the heart of what he was saying. Washington stinks. Politicians stink. Let's throw the bums out. And I think that is a message that also has continued to be picked up right through today.
I love the voodoo stick. I got to get myself a voodoo stick.
Right.
The voodoo stick was just like a weird stick with an alligator claw at the end of it. I never heard that term. Have you heard the term voodoo stick?
No, I have not heard that. I mean,
but it's
other than this.
Voodoo stick.
Right.
And it's not Dana Carvey because you think it's a joke. And so when Dana Carvey was elevating it for comedic purposes, there wasn't much you needed to go because you had the guy. And this is a direct-to-camera national commercial he bought. He's talking about a woman he met who had a baby and hitchhiking, and the way he framed everything. It was not stream of consciousness when you watch it. This was very planned out what he was doing.
And he focused on the deficit. I mean, that really was his issue. It was a little bit like his wall, meaning it was a theme he would not stop talking about. It was the cause of every problem in the country, and this was what had to be solved. And it was effective for someone without a party, for someone without campaigning. He figured out, again, that's part of how you sell a message in modern politics. And the other candidates, both of them, they embraced deficit reduction as a central theme when it hadn't really been.
Because of him.
Because of him. He had a huge influence that way.
And it's so funny because deficit reduction is now not talked about at all. Donald Trump is just doubling, tripling down on the deficit.
Yeah.
And because the Democrats generally don't call that issue out and the Republicans don't really care, it's going to be so huge at some point. Someone's going to pay that debt. I don't know when. Our children, our grandchildren, I have no clue. But I saw that he spent $65 million of his own money at some point. So it reminded me of Tom Steyer now with his, I think, $100 million ad. I think it's $100 million. I was reading really quickly that he just rolled it out. Tom 2020 all over. And I've had Tom on many times. I'm going to try to, obviously everybody wants him on now, but we've done events together with him in New Orleans, and I did one in North Carolina. So we're friends. We're friendly. I should say we're not friends. I don't have your phone number. We're not really friends. So we're friendly. Do you think $100 million ad buy by Tom Steyer is a good investment? What about doing a Ross Perot infomercial about really buying a half hour? Yeah,
I mean, look, for Democrats, the good news is he's not doing this as an independent, so he's not doing a Schultz or Perot stuff, so he won't steal votes for them. But it's a question: is this the best investment of that money? It's unlikely he's going to get anywhere as a candidate. So if he took that money and used it either for ads on issues or for the campaign support, that's big bucks. I mean, that's a Koch brother kind of contributor of the left of the Democratic Party. So I think some Democrats are going to be asking, why are you investing it this way? My guess is part of it's him, but part of it, he wants to get his messages in the mix, impeachment, climate change, and make sure they're talked about.
I interviewed him like 2.5 years ago when he was rumored to run for governor of California or Senate, and we sat down and we did an interview, and he said, I just want to do whatever is the most effective thing to do. So I thought he was sort of kidding. I'm like, oh, he's going to run for governor or Senate. And he didn't. And then he went, and I interviewed him a bunch of other times. Then he went to Iowa and was thinking of running. And then he decides, I'm not going to run. And I had him on after. And I go, what happened in Iowa? I'm like, what was going on there? And he was really committed to it's just, I don't think it's a good use of my money or time. I think much better for me to invest in others. If I went back and played that interview back, it's almost like undermining what he's doing now. So I'm kind of stunned by this.
And originally what he was doing was giving money on climate change he was a PAC for climate change for candidates who would support that, which was a great, I think, idea for Democrats because there was no one comparable doing that. So this is a different model. It's about him rather than others, rather than issues. And I don't know. I think he might be frustrated pretty quickly with his own investment.
Well, we'll see. I guess you'll wait for some polls to come out. Yeah. He has decent name recognition. There was a point when he was for impeachment before anyone else. Yeah. We would have him on. I'm like, I wasn't even for it at that point. I mean, I wanted the Mueller report. Yeah. I'm like, why don't you wait for the Mueller report? Then Democratic base now 80%, the Gallup poll, and we'll talk about it later, is saying they support impeachment. He was ahead of the curve. Oh, yeah. I could see him getting 2 or 3% in a poll and qualifying. He could potentially qualify for the end of July. The deadline is in a few days from now. In fact, the deadline's coming up where you have to have 65,000 individual donors and 1% in at least 3 polls. He's probably not going to make that. But September, it doubles, 130,000 donations and 2% in the polls. And that'll be a tougher one to qualify for. He might be able to qualify for that.
Yeah, I mean, look, from the cynical perspective, they'd say, here's a wealthy guy who wants to be running for president, period. From a more a different perspective is he is someone who believes this country is in a serious crisis, that the democracy is at risk. And even if he's not going to win, that by being part of the mix, that's the best ad. He can be on the debate stage. If he can get in, he can make speeches and he can get interviews in the media, and he can make sure that impeachment word stays front and center when he sees the parties basically moving away from it.
And I'm on many of the candidates' email lists because I put myself on. And so Liz Warren, I don't know if you saw it, the email slamming Tom Steyer by name. The Ray in the email is Tom Steyer. Just got it right before the show. And saying this week the primary got more crowded and more expensive. Tom Steyer announced he's running. He plans to spend at least $100 million of his own money. It's good to have a competitive primary, but here's the thing. We need our candidates to compete to have the best ideas, not just to write themselves the biggest checks. Can you give me money? So she goes, can you give me money? Yeah. She raised $19 million without doing any fundraisers. What a remarkable...
It's an amazing story, and the way her candidacy has picked up, gained steam, not just with fundraising, with polling, and simply the feedback you're getting from reports about her speaking. It's really impressive, and it's very different than most campaigns. She's avoiding the noise. She's avoiding a lot of the media scrum, and she's just doing steady, slow, disciplined campaigning, old-fashioned way, and it's working.
I think potentially that she pushed other candidates to come out with detailed proposals because she was so, I have a plan for that, became her buzzword, which is a great buzzword. And it almost seems laughable now if Trump brings up like Pocahontas. I'm like, well, she's clearly about all these policies. Why do you keep bringing up this racist garbage? It's just racism at this point if he brought it up. So let's take a quick break and come back and talk about your article about for CNN, which is instructive. He's not a pro-Trumper, Julian, but he's like, don't underestimate Trump and lessons we can learn from other one-term presidents. And what can we learn as those who want to get rid of Trump from the 2 one-term presidents who lost in modern day? Perhaps we can find a silver bullet in this. We'll talk to Julian Zelizer right after this quick break.
The Dean Obeidallah Show.
I think Trump clips that they play on the media should come with a health warning saying that if you watch this, you'll get dumber. Never has somebody said so much stupid in so little time as Donald Trump does.
SiriusXM Progress. This is the Dean Obeidallah Show, exclusively on SiriusXM's Progress.
And welcome back to the Dean Obeidallah Show. We're live right here. Our friend Julian Zelizer, CNN contributor, is here. So you wrote 90 articles this week. One of the articles you wrote, he writes a lot of articles. You wrote an article about don't underestimate Donald Trump, and you weren't saying it as you're not a Republican. You were saying it as an objective warning. Why? First of all, what lessons can we take from other modern-day one-term presidents, which of course were Jimmy Carter and George Herbert Walker Bush?
Yeah. I mean, part of the point was if you just take Trump out of it, you just look at how do presidents do. Most of them win re-elections. Yes. Carter and H.W. were the only ones who didn't since Herbert Hoover. All the others have, unless like Harry Truman or Lyndon Johnson, they decided not to run, or Kennedy obviously was assassinated. All the others have won. The two who lost, both lost when the economy was doing poorly. It was in terrible condition in 1980. We were in a deep recession in 92. Their parties, the Democrats in 1980, Republicans in 92, were pretty divided, and that undercut the ability of the incumbents to win. Right now, Trump doesn't suffer either of those. The economy, for all its problems, is still pretty strong. Party's totally united behind him and enthusiastic about him in a way that the other two incumbents didn't experience. And the final thing is, he has this massive media world of conservative media, which no other president has had, really. And he's going to be able to use it. So the article wasn't as much a Trump himself as just looking at where he is going into the fall. If things are like this, it's going to be tough to knock him down, even with the approval ratings that he's faced, which are going up. So Democrats want to...
They are because of...
Yeah. And so to think...
Pelosi.
They can't think of this as a replacement election, meaning just find the person who's easiest to switch out. And often that's how people think of Biden. They're going to need a pretty formidable campaign, I think, to knock him down.
So, though, I want to ask you about one thing. Ronald Reagan's approval ratings, not too long from now where Trump was, they're actually slightly above where Trump is now. But up until a few months ago, Reagan's approval ratings were lower than Trump's, the exact same days into it. And the economy was a mess in 82. People forget this. So 82, we have a recession. And even when he wins re-election, unemployment was not very low, but the difference, it was trending lower. I can't remember the numbers. I looked this all up a while ago. I wrote an article. It was maybe 6.5%. Something kind of not terrible, but not good. But the trend was better. And that's how he won. And he won a convincing re-election against Mondale in 84. Now, what if you flip it? Right now, we're at 3.7 unemployment rate, right? And the trend, I don't know where it's going to be in a year. I'm not rooting against the economy, but I think it's likely we're going to see an unemployment rate that's higher than this. If the trend starts moving the other way and we're at 4.4, 4.5, then it allows a Democrat to make the case that, look, he inherited a great economy from President Obama and he's now destroying it. And Trump will just blame everybody in the world, Democrats, Ivanka, whoever. He'll just blame everyone, blame me for that. But do you think if the economy begins to trend negative, that makes him extremely vulnerable? That increases vulnerability?
It depends how much. So I think it's generally unemployment's in good shape right now in a lot of the country, including states like Wisconsin. And so even if it goes up a little bit, Democrats could make that argument. But it's about what do people feel? Do their family members have jobs? Do their friends have jobs? And if that's not clearly changing, I'm not sure that's going to, do enough for Democrats to undercut that. You're right in that Reagan's trend line, it was at 10% unemployment in 1982. And so it's going down. So the question is, will Trump be kind of steady with the economy or will it be getting worse? But I think it will have to it's so good. And I understand all the structural problems and but the numbers are still good at a basic level. They have to go up enough to shake people's confidence. I don't know if that's going to happen.
And Julian, what you just mentioned is a point that I try to make all the time, that a politician cannot tell you the economy is any better or worse than you're feeling it.
Right.
So when there's a politician going, the economy's great and you are not doing well, it doesn't matter what they say. Or if someone tells you, hey, the economy's horrible and you're doing well. So these things just reaffirm what you really have. If the economy is good and they tell you it's good and you give credit to that politician. But, still, do you know what the labor it's a pop quiz.
Yeah.
The labor participation rate when Trump came in, do you know what that was?
No.
62.9%. That's what it was. Do you know what it is today? 62.9% as of this month.
Right.
And it's gone up and down a little. But my point is, that is the percentage of Americans working or looking for work.
Yeah.
Still, and while people have aged out, I get that, you have the same 95 million people on the sidelines of our economy right now. If that 95 million came in, registered, and voted, they could tip the election. They're not going to do that. A lot of them are just discounted from the whole system. But it's not that. And some of the jobs created, and Joy Reid does a great job on her show talking about it. They'll say job created, and it's like 2 part-time jobs, or someone has 3 jobs, and that's added to the thing, because you have a bizarre thing where we had 2 months ago only 75,000 jobs created, which was way below anything it should have been, and then it jumps to almost 200,000 the next month. And you're like, what happened?
You suggesting they're cooking the numbers?
The problem is then we've all been influenced by Trump, who claimed the numbers were all fake when he was running, and he called this exact same labor participation rate that you have unemployment of 40% in this country. That's what he said. That's the real unemployment, using that number.
Yeah.
And it was laughable.
Yeah.
Because I don't really think you tell someone the economy is worse or better than it is. So I didn't care that he was lying about that. It didn't matter. He could say whatever he wants.
I mean, I think Democrats, if they get into a debate like that, it's going to be tough. But if you get into a debate of how do you make the economy, even a good one, better for more middle class Americans,
I agree.
That's the argument. That's the Warren kind of argument, and I think it has clarity. And many people would be sympathetic. Yeah, we have jobs, but we're doing 2 jobs at once, or they're jobs that we don't know we'll have in 2 years. How do you fix that?
All right, here's a good question. Here is Mike from New Jersey got a question. Since you're an historian, this is actually perfect.
And a New Jersey-born historian.
Mike, how are you?
Actually, I'm a reverse commuter. I commute between Queens and New Jersey, unfortunately. Anyway, 2 things here. I remember way back in 1988, George H.W. Bush said, stay the course. Now, he was running not a great candidate, Dukakis, and he benefited from, quote, the great economy. Gore, we had a really good economy in 2000. It was starting to go a little south in terms of recession, but it was still strong enough, but no reward for Al Gore. Obama, and both Clinton and Obama came under rough economic circumstances and moved the economy forward, yet Hillary Clinton didn't benefit from that economy. So how much weight do you put on a good economy for an incumbent?
Well, it still helps. Both of the cases you just talked about weren't the president running for re-election. Bush is continuing with a presidency. So Clinton is trying to win after Obama's done. So it's a little different than Reagan running in '84 and saying, "This is my economy, I own it." But that's the question of the election. If the economy is like this, is it not enough to have a good economy when you're this kind of president, generating this kind of unhappiness and disapproval ratings? Can that trump over good or relatively good economic conditions? And I don't know. A lot of Democrats are hoping that's the case, but I am not convinced, and I think those 2 cases are a little different. Al Gore, that was the other case that the caller mentioned. He was also saddled with the Clinton scandals, the investigations, and his inability. He didn't want to connect to the Clinton presidency.
I know.
So he
ran away
literally
from it.
distances himself from that economy. That would have been a winning argument. We did this. This is our economy. And then he might have won the popular vote. Oh, he did. But it might have been more decisive.
So another question, if I can.
Sure.
We talk a little bit about things like tribalism, and I'm wondering, we talk about demographics, and there's different theories, the white vote, Democrats, if they can get 38, 39% of the white vote, they could win. But as we move forward, will you see, as the number of white people shrink, as a percentage of the pot, do you see them more and more voting as a block, like based upon their whiteness? And if you get 80% or 90% of the white vote, you'd still...
Mike, we're losing you there, Mike, at the end there. All right, Mike, I'll let you go because now it's breaking up, but that's a great question. It's the idea of white identity politics. And you go first, and because it's something that I read in the New York Times a few years ago, and I've talked a lot about on the show, but go ahead.
Well, it's clearly out there, and either explicitly or implicitly, it's often what President Trump is appealing to. I mean, even as he slams identity politics, he's actually playing to it. That's the idea. It's the other identity he doesn't want to support, or he's with the other people. The problem is it's not necessarily a block. So it's cut up by education levels. So suburban white voters are not necessarily going to vote where conservative rural, less educated white voter. So it's not, I don't think, ever going to unify into a partisan tribe. But I do think it's been at the heart of a lot of what Republican politics has been trying to do.
Interestingly, there was, and I didn't read it for today, so I'm doing it from memory. I've talked about it on the show a few times. There was an article, I think, late 2016, maybe right after the election, or early 2017 in the New York Times, where they talked about white identity politics. And they talked about a study done in the mid-2000s during Bush. And they asked white people, how important is your race to your voting? And it was not even a statistically significant number. It was so low. One of the pollsters said it's like asking a person, like, what do you think of the oxygen you breathe every day? You don't even think about it. Then flash forward to like 2014, 15. And they asked Republicans, and a third of Republicans felt that the white race was under siege. And that changed. And Trump played on that. I think he actually organically identifies with it. He could be a showman and it's all a lie, but I think the victimhood of Trump, I think, is sincere. That he really feels like everything, he's a victim. He's the biggest victim billionaire you've ever met in your life. So that white identity politics, and that predicted that it would get more, as demographic change becomes more present, it becomes more acute, that sense of we're a tribe and we're going to lose. Now, I don't think liberal white people are going to join with them, but I think you're appealing to in the middle and on the right who are going to vote as a bloc if they start really feeling like their race is under siege.
Well, that's the message with, if you watched Fox News on immigration, that is the message. It's often said. It's not even subtle about the threat. And so I think that's what they're, betting on. I don't know if it'll work. It's white male voters. I mean, with white women, they don't get the vote.
White women, he got 53. Right, he got 53%. In the midterms of white women, they got 49% of the Republicans, which is so below halfway. But what do you make? And I want to. You're a professor at Princeton, an Ivy League school, a hallowed institution, and everything. Don't want to do it. This is not elitist. This is a question sincerely about. The polling shows continually over and over and over Donald Trump's number one support base are white men without a college degree. 60% approval rating often in these polls. And white men with a college degree, it's way below 50%. Is it simply going to college? Like, what happens in there? And we have to have free college education, I think. Clearly that makes the case for it. What is it?
Well, some of it's the economic insecurity, and you need that college degree. You even need post-college degree now to get some of the best jobs. So it makes sense that if he's appealing to people with economic anxiety, often doing it through racial appeals and other kinds of arguments, they will be sympathetic to some of what he is saying. And I think that's part of it. The other argument would be that, if you don't have as much education, you're kind of more open to information from many sources. And so the conservative media can have a stronger hold on the way you think about the world. Right. And so I think those are two important factors. And then there's an anti-elitism that Republicans have played on since Nixon. And it's been a consistent theme that the liberal Northeastern University, media-centered world is out of touch. And it's a powerful argument. It's just a powerful argument.
No, and I hear that last point, and they went and voted for a guy who was a Northeast billionaire who used to be a TV star on NBC network. I mean, so that makes no sense. The first point you made, though, is not something I ever thought of or even discussed with people. The second point was they did go to college and you meet different people and critical thinking skills. But the first point makes a lot of sense to me, that a lot of the people who don't have college degrees some of them are the most economically vulnerable people and insecure economically, not insecure like, insecurity in real life, like really financially insecure, because studies show that unemployment is higher among people who only have a high school diploma and stuff like that. So that adds another factor. It's not just about education level. It's about they're the ones that are most economically struggling, so Trump appeals to them.
And it's not, even if they have a job, if someone has a job right now and the income's okay, they can pay their mortgage and put food on the table, often without a college degree, the kind of job you have isn't necessarily going to be there for 4 or 5 years like a lot of college educated people are able to enjoy. And so that creates just permanent insecurity. And then you can be very open to sometimes demagogic appeals, even if they're not based on real promises of anything.
See, that's why he teaches at Princeton, folks, because that first answer, no one, and I've always been here being, I guess my elitism perhaps showed it, because I was not trying to be elitist at all. I don't really think that, I know people who have law degrees who are absolute idiots. I mean, I'm not kidding, objectively speaking. I've met many people who just finished high school who are brilliant. I mean, Chris Rock, for example, a comedian who's, just studied and read on your own. There's no limit to you. You don't have to go to formal education to be smart. You don't. But I didn't think about the first one, that first factor, not having a college degree. There's an objective indicator that deals with economic circumstance. So let's take a quick break. We'll come back with more of our friend Julian Zelizer right after this. Progressive values are the best of American values, and we need to keep fighting for them to save our country.
Don't go anywhere. This is the Dean Obadala Show on Sirius XM Progress 127.
And now, more of the Dean Obadala Show on Sirius XM's Progress.
And welcome back to the Dean Obadala Show. We're live Wednesday, July 10th. By the way, the top of the hour, it's all live. We're going to do an hour special on climate change and environmental justice with Collin O'Mara and Mustafa Santiago Ali. And Mustafa's been on before. You see him on MS a great deal of the time. Talk about those issues because it's really important what they want to see in the 2020 candidates, what they are seeing, what they're not seeing. But it'd be great to have him in studio. So let's talk about impeachment here, because this is an issue we've talked about a lot. And I was stunned by the July 3rd poll, because no one's talking impeachment much anymore. July 3rd Gallup poll, because I cited it in an article for CNN. 81% of Democrats now support impeachment. You can't get 81% of Democrats to agree on the color of the sky. 81% of Democrats. And there's a range. The low I've seen about 65%, and this is the high. I've seen another CNN 70. Let me put it this way. At what point does this number become a problem for Speaker Pelosi and the leadership, where there's actually a mutiny or rebellion beneath the surface?
After November.
Next year.
Meaning she is willing to tolerate that poll going up. If it's not at 100%, Speaker Pelosi would say it's useless, that you need every Democrat in Congress on board, and if the public isn't there, it won't happen. It's clearly, though, as the number of legislators who support impeachment and those polls go up, it does create more public pressure, and you're seeing that friction play out. But she is pretty clear that that's not happening right now. So she's making a bet. Come November, she'll keep the majority, and her strategy will help elect President Trump. If it doesn't happen,
not President Trump, but Democratic president.
She'll help elect a Democratic president. If those two things don't happen, or even one of them, then these numbers are a big problem. She won't be a leader anymore.
It's interesting. I talked to Michael Steele, the former RNC chair. I was on his podcast today. I guess it comes out tomorrow. I'm not sure, but and I should have him on the show. I will. He's such a great guy. I haven't had him on in a while. And talked about when he was RNC chair, dealing with this very issue, where the base wanted something, and they're sitting in the room going, "That's the wrong thing to do." Right. And his point was not that we were always right, but his point was, if we didn't do what the base wanted, we paid the price later. Like, you can't escape it. And he goes, Speaker Pelosi will pay the price if things don't go well.
Right. If things don't, but if they do go well, she will be the visionary who understood that's how people will see her. And they'll say she made the right call.
And she deserves that. But it's such a risk. Here's the thing, though. I have people calling in, and I agree with this. First of all, constitutionally, legally, I think it's the right thing to do, impeachment. But secondly, we would rather go down fighting against Trump than not use every tool in the toolbox, and then he wins re-election. And so if we push for impeachment, and Speaker Pelosi goes, "I'm telling you not to do this," and then she goes, "I'm going to do this only because the base is demanding it," and at the end she can even say, "I told you so," I would be fine with that. I'd be like, "You can even stay as Speaker because we pushed you to do something you didn't want to do. It wasn't the right thing." But we are dictating the narrative by forcing Trump to answer to impeachment for 6 to 8 months, because Congress works 3 days a week when they're working, so it'll take 6 months or 8 months. They're off in August.
Yeah. No, I agree. And I think, look, on the legal front, there will be long-term questions. Whatever happens in 220, was this the wrong thing for her to do as a political leader? Put aside her own concerns in the short term. Did she just legitimate or help to legitimate what the president did by saying, well, we can't really do anything about it? But then there is this political question. If this doesn't work out, it won't simply be her strategy didn't work. There will be Democrats who said, you kind of helped create these bad conditions for Democrats. You didn't take advantage of the moment. Mm-hmm. You didn't go after a weakened president, and you didn't do what was right for this promise that didn't come out. So that's where she's placing her bet. She's very disciplined, though. She will not change her mind easily. I think she's more disciplined in some ways than Speaker Boehner was, and less swayed by the base. He seemed to have lost
control.
He lost control. She won't.
Right. I want to ask you something without even hinting about my own view on this. But the point of Speaker Pelosi and others is that the Democrats won control by flipping Republican districts, and that you're going to lose those seats if you do impeachment. What's your take on that?
I don't think that's true. I think they did win by flipping Republican seats, but the Republican seats flipped because people were angry with the kind of president that Trump was. It wasn't simply issues like health care, and part of it was this sense of a need for checks and balances. So it's not clear to me if that was the main part of 2018, and all this horrible stuff comes out about what the president did. Why would it be costly for Democrats to really aggressively look into what has to happen? So I don't really buy the premise of her argument. And I think it actually might be reading the tea leaves the wrong way.
It's funny. I had the same thing with other Democrats and Michael Steele today. And Steele's like, well, Trump will use the impeachment. Look, you're after me. I'm like, he'll do it anyway. It doesn't really matter. And secondly, the GOP is so concerned. And I told him this. The Republican Congressional Committee did polls in 4 swing districts that showed impeachment is not popular. to make those members of Congress see that, because they're Democrats, because they're very fearful of impeachment. They're worried it could go anyway. Who really knows how it works out?
Impeachment's always going to be unpopular if the opposition party leaders aren't supporting it. So it's a non-starter this way. Part of how it changes is the party with the speaker at the forefront say this has to happen. You make a case. You go on the media all the time. They're not doing that. So why would voters in swing districts in mass turn?
Right.
They're not going to do it.
And I agree with your first point so much that, and that's the same conversation I've had with Democrats, that they didn't swing the district because they wanted a doormat for Donald Trump. If they wanted that, they would have just kept the Republican. They wanted someone to be a check on Trump on a whole bunch of things. They were not voting to impeach Trump, but they were voting for someone to be there to save their health care, whatever the list goes on, the bad habits, instincts of Trump. And one of them would be, if you do not make it a partisan joke, you do a proper impeachment inquiry first, an inquiry alone for 6 to 8 months. And at the end, you go, here's all the evidence, and we can't draft articles of impeachment, or we can, but show it's conscientious and it's done in a way that's above board. I know that's hard in this day and age because I can just picture what Jim Jordan and Mark Meadows are going to do to Robert Mueller next week and how it's going to be a festival of craziness. But I agree with you so much. I think it's the right thing to do politically.
But it won't happen. I really don't think I think it's off the table now. Now we're well into the election season, and the moment passed when she did have the space to do this and do it the right way.
The only difference is next week, Robert Mueller, next Wednesday.
Yeah.
And if nothing comes after that, then they go on recess for the whole month of August. Yeah. And unless they go home to their district and they get pelted, and they come back to the speaker and go, I'm getting destroyed in my district if we don't do impeachment. Just so you know, we're going to all lose. That's the only way, because if they don't start in September, it's never, ever happened. It's not happening in our lifetimes, folks. It's not going to happen. All right, let's take a quick break. We'll come right back.
Okay.
Dean Obadala Show on Sirius XM Progress 127. Dean Obadala Show on Sirius XM Progress 127.
And welcome back to Dean Obadala Show. We're live. We have Julian Zelizer, CNN contributor and Princeton professor. So we have 2 minutes left. The polls now, the media will pick and choose whatever poll they want. They create a horse race. That's what they do. But there was an economist poll that came out today. It's pretty good polling. Biden at 22%, Warren 18%, Harris at 15%, Sanders at 12%. But there was a poll yesterday, Politico, which is a pretty good polling. Biden at 30%, and the next closest Democrat at 19%. So what's going on? I mean, it's because it's Democratic primary polls. Can you trust these? Are they just give you a sense of trends, or can you rely on them?
It's just trends. It's. I think a lot of people are just kind of tuning in, and so there's going to be some movability. But it's clear the non-Bidens, 2 of them at least, are moving up. That's a consistent trend. And so in some ways, that's the most important story. He is ahead. He's maintaining his lead, but he hasn't locked it in at all. And we're months from Iowa and New Hampshire, Super Tuesday.
So when we have a minute left, but just traditionally, and nothing really applies any longer, but just assume it did, at what point do the polls become more locked in where a candidate nothing? There's no place?
Well, no, these polls don't really matter. So we need to be looking in the fall for real.
So those will be after a bunch of debates. We'll have another debate coming up in a week or two, and then nothing in August.
The debates matter.
September. They did this time.
I think this platform matters.
Julian, thank you very much, my friend, for coming in.
Pleasure.
And when we come back, we're doing an hour deep dive with Collin O'Mara and Mustafa Santiago Ali about environmental justice, climate change, wildlife conservation, and the intersection of 2020 right after this.